Hello, everyone, and welcome to this next installment of these cooking webinar slash recipe classes on gluten-free, dairy-free, and sugar-free. In some previous classes, I talked about stir fries. I did soups once, and then also covered salads. And then last time we talked about breakfast recipes. And in this one in the series, I am talking about some different desserts. Now, granted, because we are going for sugar-free, some of these desserts could technically also be your breakfast as well, because, you can sometimes have dessert for breakfast if you are going for things that don't have any refined sugar. I also want to emphasize that when I say refined sugar, what I mean is there's no white sugar, there's no brown sugar, there's no processed actual sugar. However, depending on how you decide to sweeten things, some things will potentially have possibly some honey or maple syrup, a few things like that that technically do turn into sugar. So if you're not careful, they are kind of, to some degree, there is a sweetener of some kind involved. So not necessarily totally sugar-free, if you will, I guess, depending on how people define it. So the first thing that I want to show you is how to do a chia seed pudding. And this is one of those things that you can do for breakfast, but you can also do it as a really good dessert. And the first thing that you want to have, and this is something that I highly recommend you have as part of your kitchen staples as far as equipment and that kind of thing goes, is some of these little smaller jars. These particular ones came from Amazon, but you can get them like at Walmart. They have lots of different places. And the biggest advantage to this, as opposed to just like a jar that you just have the lid that screws on, as you can kind of see there, the top opens and closes, and you can shut it closed all the way as well. So it gets it so that it's totally airtight and you don't have things trying to spill out and that kind of thing. And if you're going to put something that's pretty liquidy like a chia pudding, then you want to have, and I use these for like my overnight oats, all that kind of stuff too. So you want to have these kind of little jars. This particular one is, I believe, approximately six ounces. I think it's 6 ounces. It looks smaller than 8 ounces to me. Okay, you have that one. Then you have your chia seeds. These have been taken out of the bag or the box, but basically you can just find these almost anywhere. They even have them at Walmart. So you just get chia seeds, and then what you do, you just start by putting the chia seeds. And basically what I like to do is just kind of fill the bottom. So you want to have probably just a little tiny, I bet that's probably about 1/4 of an inch, cover the bottom of it. So you don't want to have so many in there that it spills over and you fill your entire jar. So you want just a few like that. And then what you want to do is take your dairy-free milk. In this particular case, this is almond milk, and you want to use the unsweetened, of course, but you could also use like cashew milk or what else is out there? Coconut milk. Really, any of those dairy-free milks will work. I don't recommend soy milk just because I don't really recommend soy milk in general, because soy can cause some hormonal issues in a lot of people. So too much soy is not really great for your health. So I don't do soy milk, but pretty much any of the other dairy-free milks, so even rice milk would work. And so you just kind of fill it till it's not quite full. You'll see those seeds have already kind of started rising to the top. And then you want to probably add in some sort of sweetener. Typically what I recommend with these is some kind of like a stevia sweetener. So this is like a vanilla flavored. So I'm basically just going to take the cap off of this, and I'm going to just put a few drops in here. I want to be careful to not do too many, so probably just like 2 or 3. I'm just going to let that absorb in here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close it tight shut. And then I'll keep this out for a little bit, but then once we are through tonight, this is going to go in my fridge, and then in the morning it will be all gelled into kind of like a pudding. So you got to do it overnight, and then you can put like some kind of fruit with it or something, or you could just eat it plain if you really want to. It would be pretty good as well. The other option, if you don't like the stevia taste or whatever, you could put a little bit of honey or maple syrup in it, but that definitely has a higher carb count to it, is quite a bit sweeter, and you probably don't want to add that until the pudding gel is created. So you would add that in the morning, but the stevia works better if you do it overnight. So that's just going to go in my fridge for tonight. And one advantage to this is I technically could make a whole bunch of jars if I wanted. So if I was serving multiple people, like for a dinner party or something like that, or if I wanted to have one every day for the whole week, I could probably do that too. So that's your chia seed pudding. Then the next thing, and this is another thing that could also be a breakfast as well, is you can start with like some frozen fruit at the bottom of a bowl. And this one's going to be kind of hard to see, but maybe I can kind of, there we go. So in this particular case, I've just got frozen cherries, but you could also do blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, all that kind of stuff at the bottom of your bowl. And then what you want to do is put on top of that some dairy-free yogurt. And this particular one is the brand Forager Project. This is the probiotic cashew milk yogurt, the unsweetened plain. And that's really, really important. So you want to have the unsweetened plain on any of these dairy-free yogurts. If you go after, a lot of times people don't realize that even a vanilla yogurt is going to actually have added sweetener. And a lot of times it's actual white sugar or refined cane sugar that's actually added to it. Same thing with anything like a strawberry, anything like that. They put sugar into it usually. So you want to have just the plain, and you just want to spoon some. And I'll probably end up eating this after the webinar because I'm going to try this. So I'm just going to take just probably, you can see this is pretty nice and thick and creamy. They do a really good job with this particular brand and their dairy yogurts. It's not super liquidy, and you can just take a few spoonfuls and then just put it with the fruit. And then if you want to have a little bit more sweetener, you could do something like just, a little bit of honey. I don't know that I'm going to do that because I want to keep mine pretty non-sweet, but you could technically probably do that too as well. And so, yeah, you're basically just having fruit with yogurt. And so, like I said, that's another one that makes a good breakfast as well as somewhat of a dessert. Got a little yogurt there on my hand. Okay, there we go. So that's that one. Then the third one is something that's actually super simple. And this is probably honestly got to be one of the best kitchen investments that I have made in my life. And I'm going to start posting in the chat a few of the notes. I will likely email these all out to you too, so you will be able to access them. But I'm just going to start by putting a few things. Some of these are ways that you can join an email list and get notified of future events, check out my blog, a few things like that. And then I'm going to also put on here the link on Amazon to where I got this machine. And what this machine is this machine is called a Yonanas, I think is how they pronounce it. You can kind of see that there. It plugs into the wall and it snaps on. It's got a little thing, so it looks kind of almost like a juicer type thing, but it isn't. Because what this is a frozen dessert ice cream slash maker. They market it really as like a thing that you can use to make ice cream out of bananas. And it actually is really amazing. You wouldn't even believe it. I was all out of bananas, unfortunately, so I don't have the ability to actually show you how to do it. But you basically, what you do is you freeze the bananas, and when they're frozen, you stick them in probably, depending on how much you want, probably about 3 or 4 bananas. You stick them in the chute, and then you just kind of push them out, and it comes out this spout into a bowl. And it literally turns those frozen bananas into something creamy that you can literally just eat it like ice cream, and it's literally nothing but banana. You can also, this machine also comes with some extra recipes. They will tell you that you can do things like try to do strawberry banana or raspberries, different fruits, things like that. But a few things that I've tried that really didn't work is I tried like cherries once, and it just split them up into kind of 2 little bits and pieces, didn't really work. So really bananas are my favorite for this kind of thing. Could experiment, see if you can find anything else that works, but I have to say, especially if you're one of those people that's really trying to not eat ice cream and get away from like a lot of the super sweet, sugary type stuff. And of course, your bananas are still going to have high carb, technically kind of a high fruit sugar content, but you're literally still going to be way better for you having just the bananas. And this machine, it's amazing what it does. So that's that. Then the next thing that you can do, and I ran out of apples, so I don't have any apples to actually show you on this one either. But what you can do with this one, and I'm going to put the recipe in here so that you at least have access to the recipe, is you can do, and let me actually post the chia seed pudding. Let me post some of these other, actually, I'm just going to stick them all in there for now, and then you can see them all, and then we'll follow along with them. Oh, okay. It's telling me my message is too long for the chat, so it wants me to shorten it. So let me just put a few of these here. Just cut to here. Put the chia seed recipe. Okay. There you go. So we have the chia seed recipe in there, and then you have a baked apple recipe. So another thing you can do is, of course, depending on the sweet tooth level, you could just, eat a plain apple. But in order to spice it up, so to speak, and make it into more of an official dessert, and this makes actually a really good one that you can actually even take to a party that people will actually want to eat, is you can actually core apples. So the way you would do that would be like the inner part of like a chopper, but without, or there's specific apple coring machines, I guess, but you can try to just kind of use that without really cutting the whole apple open. And you take the core out so that you have an apple with like a hole in it. And then what you can do is you can put wax paper on a baking sheet and put the apples on there. And depending on how many you want, typically I probably would do anywhere from 6 to 12 apples at once. And then preheat your oven to about 400 degrees. And then you can take a mixture of honey. So you can take your honey and your cinnamon and fill the holes that are created in the apples by removing the cores with some honey and cinnamon. And typically what you'll want to do is put maybe about a tablespoon or so of honey in each apple. So you don't want to overdo it so that you have too much. And then, just a little sprinkle of cinnamon. So you've got that honey and cinnamon in the apples, and you put it in the oven and you cook those apples for about 45 minutes to an hour. It's going to vary a little bit depending on the size of the apple, the kind of the apple. Typically, I will use like a red, probably like a red crisp type apple would be the main kind of apple. Like I've never done it with green apples. I don't know how that would taste. And I haven't really done it with like the bigger dark red apples. So more like your light or like Honey Crisp type red apples is typically what I've used. And if the apples are bigger, then it's going to take longer. If the apples are smaller, it's going to take, just because you just want the apples to cook is basically the idea. And then when you take it out, you can sprinkle a few raisins with it if you want. You don't absolutely have to, but I like putting the raisins on with it. And then you can just give people like a baked apple. So it's kind of sort of like a twist on trying to do a caramel apple, but you don't have, the caramel and the fat, some of the sugar and some of the stuff that's in there. So you basically are just creating like this honey cinnamon apple. And technically, if you wanted to really not have the sweetener, so if you wanted to not even have honey, you technically could just even bake them and then just put in like a little bit of cinnamon, or even if you don't have a problem with butter. So, I know this is primarily aimed to be dairy free as well, but if butter's not a concern for you, you could technically even put like a little bit of butter in with the baked apple after it comes out of the oven with the cinnamon, and then do, kind of a twist on a apple pie sort of, except for that it's just like a baked apple with some little butter and cinnamon in it. And then you don't have as much of the sugar in it. So there's a couple different ways to do that. There's also lots of recipes out there for apple crisp where you could do kind of a knock on that, but you could also add in some gluten-free oats and make it kind of like a pie type thing, kind of, which actually leads me into the next thing that I'm going to put. So let me find this recipe as well, is you can do different kinds of gluten-free oat muffins. And there's a couple different tricks to do this, and I'm going to put the basic recipe in there and then talk about some of the things that you can do to make them work pretty well. So a lot of the recipes Well, actually, I don't know if I'm going to say a lot, but it kind of just depends on the recipe. But several of the recipes out there will have you do something where you use gluten-free oats, but then you also have to use some kind of a gluten-free flour mix. And I personally like to try and avoid that and only use the oats, just because a lot of those gluten-free flour mixes have a lot of different kinds of flours. They can end up being more expensive. They also can spike your blood sugar more, because even though they don't have sugar in them, they do have things like tapioca starch and rice flour and different things like that that still have a higher glycemic index than just regular oats. So oats, even though they have carbs in them, don't have as high of a glycemic index and don't spike your blood sugar like some of the other flour mixes out there. So I like to have just a muffin that has just the oats in it. So what you can do, if you kind of follow along with the recipe I just posted there, so what you can do is there's different ways to get places to get your gluten-free oats. I have these organic ones I got from Thrive Market online, which I like, but you can also get them. And typically, they'll have them at, sometimes Walmart's a little hit and miss as far as the ability to find gluten-free oats. So Walmart's not always a great place. A lot of times some of the Kroger stores will have them. They pretty much always have them at Whole Foods. Sprouts has them, for places like that. But you can get, so you want to get your gluten-free organic rolled oats. And then what you're going to do is take a high-speed blender. So personally, I have a Blendtec. If you don't have a Blendtec, you can take like a Vitamix or any kind of a high-speed blender. So basically, you're going to be looking at a blender that's going to be more costly. So if you've got just one of those cheap blenders that you just blend fruit and vegetables in that you get for like $20 or $30 at Walmart, that's probably not a high-speed blender. Because typically on things like, especially Blendtec, and I know Vitamix does this too, it has an actual setting where you can actually create flour out of things. So what you do is you put the oats into that high-speed blender, you blend them, and you want to create about 2 times as much flour as the amount of oats. So for example, this basic recipe that I have in here will make about, depending on the size, anywhere from about 12 to 18 of your oat muffins. And what you will do is you would blend enough oats to make about 1.5 cups of oat flour. So that's going to be about 2 cups of these oats you're going to blend in the blender. And then you're going to set aside about 3/4 cup of oats. And so basically what you're doing is you're using oats to create your flour that will make that thickener that you can then create with the muffins. And then you will use the oats as well, so that you have kind of that crunchiness, and it's tastes kind of like what you're used to with an actual oat muffin. And then what you want to do is add these additional ingredients, which is the basic recipe, like I said, for about 12 to 18. So let me actually add that in there. So it makes about 12 to 18 muffins. You're going to cook for probably about 20, depends on your oven, but excuse me there, the frog in my throat, minutes in oven at about 350 degrees is going to be about your regular for most ovens. And what you're going to do is you're going to add these additional things to the oats and the oat flour. So you're going to add in about a tablespoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 2 large eggs, 1 teaspoon vanilla extract, 1 teaspoon of oil, which I usually use coconut melted oil, but you could technically use like olive oil or avocado oil, something like that. I don't recommend like the canola oil or like the cheap, like you want to try to avoid those. The seed oils are generally not good for your health, so I don't generally recommend using those. And then some kind of a sweetener. And where it gets a little tricky with the sweetener is that there's different things that you can use. You can technically use any of these things on here. So you could use honey, you can use maple syrup, you could use monk fruit, or coconut sugar would be some of the better ones. Now, coconut sugar, in case you're not familiar with it, it comes packed in a bag, and it actually looks a lot like brown sugar, but it's literally like a sugar that comes from the coconut, and it's actually not very sweet at all. So if you're going to do coconut sugar, you probably will need a little bit more coconut sugar, and you may honestly want to throw in just a little bit of honey to sweeten it, add into that coconut sugar, because it's really not going to be sweet, no matter how much you use of it. Whereas something like maple syrup has more or less the same glycemic index as brown sugar and a lot of sugar, so you want a little less of that. And same thing with the monk fruit. The monk fruit, because of its taste and its sweetness, that kind of thing, you may want a little bit less. So you have to kind of adjust the sugar a little bit. Typically, when I make them, what I usually do is I will either use honey straight or I will use coconut sugar with just a tad bit of honey, because otherwise you have like literally no sweetness in it, and then you're making something that tastes more like a bread, which is fine. But you know, if the idea is for you to have more of a dessert, then you probably want to have just a little bit of that sweetness added to it. And then you can add in all different kinds of combinations. So a couple of weeks ago, I made some where I put in a can of pumpkin because it was the start of fall. I had an extra canned pumpkin from last year, so I put in canned pumpkin. You could also put in like banana. You could put in other fruits. You could add like cinnamon and different spices. So there's all different kinds of combinations of things that you can use. Obviously, you wouldn't use all of those. You would pick one. So either you're going to make some banana ones, so you do banana, or you're going to make pumpkin, do pumpkin. You're going to make like something with some kind of a nut butter, so you put in like some peanut butter or some almond butter, or you know, maybe you want to make some strawberry ones, so you're going to put in strawberries. But you kind of get the idea. Or like a fall spice one, so you put in like some cinnamon and cloves and some different fall spices and create that as being the main flavor of your muffins. And then once you've mixed that all together in your bowl, then you're going to spray or use like the little like paper muffin things in a muffin tin. And then you're just going to put the mix in there, and then you're going to bake it, and then it comes out, and it works really, really well. I have also done it before where I did use the gluten-free flour mix, and then I used just the oats, and I have to say I didn't like it, the taste as well either. So I felt like that was pretty good. And so that's that one. And then the last recipe that I was gonna do is, let me see here, is what's called nut butter and banana muffins. And this one's a little bit of a twist. And the first time I made them, I was a little bit surprised by them because they don't have any flour in them at all. And I was pretty surprised that they actually tasted really good, even though they have no flour in them. And so what you can do is you mix them up. So this is another muffin recipe. So you're going to want like your muffin tins. So let me add that on here too. This one's going to be probably more like about 25 to 30 minutes. At about, this particular one is probably going to be, I would probably do more like 425 degrees on this one. Oh, actually, it already says 350 for 20, 30 minutes. Actually, that's already on there. But this one's probably going to make probably about 12 to 18 muffins as well. And what you do with this one is you basically just get your mixing bowl and you mix in a cup of some kind of nut butter. So you could do like almond butter, peanut butter, cashew butter, different things like that. I've done it more frequently with almond butter. Typically, what I do is I buy the almond butter at Trader Joe's because it doesn't have the sugar or the additives or whatever. You do have to be a little careful with that at some places. You probably get a sugar-free one like at Walmart or something like that if you don't have a Trader Joe's in your area. So that's a possibility. The other thing, you can do, so then you mix that and you're going to mash a couple of bananas and you put some eggs, you put a little, the recipe calls for maple syrup. You probably could use honey or like monk fruit or something like that instead. Then a teaspoon each of vanilla, baking soda, cinnamon, a little quarter teaspoon of sea salt, so just a little bit of a pinch of your ground nutmeg. And then what you do is you put in a quarter cup of either hemp seeds or powder. And this is like a hemp powder that I got from somewhere. I don't remember where I bought this. I've had this for a while. It's almost gone. I'm going to have to replace it. But they have them at lots of different stores, but you put some of this hemp powder, so about a quarter cup of this hemp powder, and then you just mix everything together to create this muffin consistency. And what happens is the baking soda works kind of like a yeast type thing to help it raise, and the hemp powder combined with the butter and the eggs, some of those things, it actually make it, you don't even miss the flour or the grains or anything like that. And it's pretty interesting that you just don't even need that stuff in this kind of a combination. There's a recipe I found somewhere on, I don't know, magazine, or I found it online, I don't remember. But it yeah, it's pretty interesting. The hemp seeds also adds quite a bit of protein and flavor and that kind of thing. And then hemp seeds are also another thing a lot of people don't realize that can actually help with like inflammation and pain as well. So it can actually be a really good for your overall health. So those are the recipes that I have. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll see if anybody has any particular questions that they want to ask. So let me get the recording stopped. Let's